The Allegory of the Cave by Plato. Excerpt from The Republic, 514a to 520a. Part 1. Setting the scene, the cave and the fire. The cave. Socrates. Imagine this. People live under the earth in a cave-like dwelling. Stretching a long way up towards the daylight is the entrance, towards which the entire cave is gathered. People have been in this dwelling since childhood, shackled by the legs and neck. Thus they stay in the same place, so that there is only one thing for them to look at, whatever they encounter in front of their faces. But because they are shackled, they are unable to turn their heads around. A fire is behind them, and there is a wall between the fire and the prisoners. Socrates. Some light, of course, is allowed them, namely from a fire that casts its glow towards them from behind them, being above and at some distance. Between the fire and those that are shackled, i.e. behind their backs, there runs a walkway at a certain height. Imagine that a low wall has been built the length of the walkway, like a low curtain that the puppeteers put up, over which they show their puppets, the images carried before the fire. Socrates. So now imagine that all along this low wall, people are carrying all sorts of things that reach higher up than the wall, statues and other carvings made of stone or wood, and many other artifacts that people have made. As you would expect, some are talking to each other as they walk along, and some are silent. Glaucon. This is an unusual picture that you are presenting here, and these are unusual prisoners. Socrates. They are very much like us humans, I responded. What the prisoners see and hear. Socrates. What do you think? From the beginning people like this have never managed, whether on their own or with the help of others, to see anything besides the shadows that are continually projected on the wall opposite them by the glow of the fire. Glaucon. How could it be otherwise, since they are forced to keep their heads immobile for their entire lives? Socrates. And what do they see of the things that are being carried along behind them? Do they not simply see these? Glaucon. Certainly. Socrates. Now, if they were able to say something about what they saw, and talk it over, do you not think that they would regard with which they saw on the wall as beings? Glaucon. They would have to. Socrates. And now what if this prison has also an echo, reverberating off the wall in front of them? Whenever one of the people walking behind those in chains would make a sound, do you think the prisoners would imagine that the speaker were anyone other than the shadow passing in front of them? Glaucon. Nothing else by Zeus. Socrates. All in all, I responded, those who are chained would consider nothing besides the shadows of the artifacts as unhidden. Glaucon. That absolutely would have to be. Part 2. 3 stages of liberation. Freedom. Stage 1. A prisoner gets free. Socrates. So now, I replied, watch the process whereby prisoners are set free from their chains, and, along with that, cured of their lack of insight, and likewise consider what lack of insight must be if the following were to happen to those who are chained. Walks back to the fire. Socrates. Whenever any of them was unchained and was forced to stand up suddenly, to turn around, to walk, and to look up towards the light, in each case the person would be able to do this only with pain, because of the flickering brightness, would be unable to look at those things whose shadows he previously saw. Is questioned about the objects. Socrates. If all this were to happen to the prisoner, what do you think he would say if someone were to inform him that what he saw before were mere trifles, but that now he was much nearer to beings, and that as a consequence of now being turned towards what is more in being, he also saw more correctly? The answer he gives. Socrates. And if someone were then to show him any of the things that were passing by, and forced him to answer the question about what it was, don't you think that he would be at a wit's end, in addition would consider that what he previously saw was more unhidden than what was now being shown? Glaucon. Yes, absolutely. Looking at the firelight itself. Socrates. And if someone even forced him to look back into the glare of the fire, would his eyes not hurt him, and would he not then turn away and flee, back to that which he is capable of looking at? And would he not decide that what he could see before without any help was in fact clearer than what was now being shown to him? Glaucon. Precisely. Freedom. Stage 2. Out of the cave into daylight. Socrates. Now, however, if someone using force were to pull him away from there and to drag him up the cave's rough and steep ascent, and not let go of him until he had dragged him out into the light of the sun, pain, rage, blindness. Socrates. Would not the one who had been dragged like this feel, in the process, pain and rage? When he got into the sunlight, wouldn't his eyes be filled with the glare, and wouldn't he thus be unable to see any of the things that are now revealed to him as the unhidden? Glaucon. He would not be able to do that at all, at least not right away. Getting used to the light. Socrates. It would obviously take some getting accustomed. I think if it should be a matter of taking into one's eyes that which is up there outside of the cave, in the light of the sun. Shadows and reflections. Socrates. And in this process of acclimatization, he would first and most easily be able to look at the shadows, and after that the images of people, and the rest of things as they are reflected in water. Looking at things directly. Socrates. Later, however, he would be able to view the things themselves, but within the range of such things, he might well contemplate what there is in the heavenly dome, and this dome itself, more easily during the night, by looking at the light of the stars and the moon, than by looking at the sun and its glare during the day. Glaucon. Certainly. Freedom. Stage 3. The sun. Looking at the sun itself. Socrates. But I think that finally he would be in a condition to look at the sun itself, not just at its reflection whether in water or wherever else it might appear, but at the sun itself, as it is in and of itself, and in the place proper to it, and to contemplate of what sort it is. Glaucon. It would necessarily happen this way. Thoughts about the sun, its nature and functions. Socrates. And having done all that, by this time he would also be able to gather the following about the sun. That it is which grants both the seasons and the years. It is that which governs whatever there is now in the visible region of sunlight, and that it is also the cause of those things that the people dwelling in the cave have before their eyes in some way or another. Glaucon. It is obvious that he would get to these things, the sun and whatever stands in its light, after he had gone out beyond those previous things, the merely reflections and shadows, thoughts about the cave. Socrates. And then what? If he again recalled his first dwelling, and the knowing that passes as the norm there, and the people with whom he was once chained, don't you think he would consider himself lucky because of the transformation that had happened, and by contrast, feel sorry for them? Glaucon. Very much so. What counts for wisdom in the cave? Socrates. However, what if among the people in the previous dwelling place, the cave, certain honours and commendations were established for whomever most clearly catches sight of what passes by, and also best remembers which of them normally is brought by first, which one later, and which ones at the same time? And what if there were honours for whoever could most easily foresee which one might come by next? What would the liberated prisoner now prefer? Socrates. Do you think the one who had gotten out of the cave would still envy those within the cave, or would want to compete with them who are esteemed and have power? Or would not he or she much rather wish for the condition that Homer speaks of, namely, to live on the land above ground as the paid menial of another destitute peasant? Wouldn't he or she prefer to put up with absolutely anything else, rather than associate with those opinions that hold in the cave, and be that kind of human being? Glaucon. I think he would prefer to endure everything rather than be that kind of human being. Part 3. The prisoner returns to the cave. The return. Blindness. Socrates. And now, I responded, consider this. If this person who had gotten out of the cave was suddenly to go back down and sit in the same place as before, Would he not find in that case, coming suddenly out of the sunlight, that his eyes were filled with darkness? Glaucon. Yes, very much so. The debate with the other prisoners. Socrates. Now, if once again, along with those who had remained shackled before, the freed prisoner was to engage in the business of asserting and maintaining opinions about the shadows, while his eyes are still weak and before they had readjusted, an adjustment that would require quite a bit of time, would he not then be exposed to ridicule down there? And would they not let him know that he had gone up, but only in order to come back down into the cave with his eyes ruined, and thus it certainly does not pay to go up? And the final outcome, Socrates. And if they can get hold of this person, who takes it in hand to free them from their chains and to lead them up, and if they could kill him, will they not actually kill him? Glaucon. They certainly will.